but today ended up being a little bit of a bait and switch. I ended up kind of changing a bit of the topic and changing how I thought about this as I dug in. I really thought about, approaching this more as just a tool and really around how it's been 10xing some of my work and things like that, which I will definitely do a demo at the end. But as I was doing more of the research and really realizing that there were several launches that I feel probably most of you aren't tracking or aren't necessarily thinking about just within the space over the last couple of days. It really was inspired by actually a talk I had with a friend who said, yeah, man, and he's working on a startup. He's just like, all software is dead. He's like, all software is going to be dead. Like, what's the point of having software if you can just build whatever it is? Like, why would I pay anyone ever again? And as I was slowly finding myself canceling some subscriptions myself and also changing subscriptions based just on its ability to use to work with the system, I really thought about what the future of software development looks like, and thought about this more holistically. So I really hope everyone's here, everyone's super interested in both learning about OpenClaw and specifically these agentic platforms, but a little bit about what this means and kind of how software really changes based on this. All right, and won't have access to like I want to, but show of virtual hands or throw it out in the chat. Who does know of the movie Her? So came out a bunch of years ago. Um, I rewatched the entire movie in prep for this talk. And one thing I'll do is quickly drop the survey link in the chat for anyone who doesn't have it. So yeah, we're going to have the agent, assuming all goes well, start pulling in some of that data and actually answering some questions for us. But anyways, the movie Her. So the movie is one thing I'm going to give a warning about is that there's a lot of anthropomorphizing of AI and kind of these agents that I'm kind of still dealing with. Whether I refer to my agent as her or it or they is funny, but it's just something that the more I'm talking about the subject, the more I have to mentally kind of think about. In the movie Her, it opens up with Joaquin Phoenix. He's lonely. Um, and there's a company that's selling a personal operating system. It's the first AI operating system. So you install it on your computer. And the process is it basically says like, hey, um, actually, no, before it says, hey, it asks a few questions like, are you lonely? Are you sociable? Kind of, are you energetic? Like, what type of person are you? And then it's like, cool. And then it says, would you like me to sound like a man or a woman? And it burrs and it gets started. And it wakes up and it's kind of like, hey, hey, I'm like alive. This is crazy. Uh, and you are then you engage with it. It just starts talking to you and it starts to learn. And it's like, hey, do you mind if I look through your computer and learn everything about you? And it does it and things like that. And it becomes a personal, operating system. You find in the one thing I found really funny about the movie is that his phone is super small. He has a super tiny little phone. He looks at it because 99% of the time he's just talking to it. He ends up falling in love with it. It's a whole thing in the movie, not to ruin it. It does bring about some really interesting things. But this came out in 2013. And to say in 2026, someone built her and open sourced it, and then it went viral. That is OpenClaw. So when you actually install OpenClaw, and this is not an install talk, I will be sending out some information on how to install and some of the favorite YouTubers I like, but this stuff is all over the internet. There's a million people who will show you how to install OpenClaw. But when you install it, this is the experience you get. This person, he actually had to wake it up, said, wake up, my friend. Says, hey, I just came online. Looks like it's our first time meeting. I've got a blank state. I have no memories, I have no name. Who are you and who do you want me to be? And if you see at the end of the cutoff, it's like, do you have something, a name in mind, or should I come up with one? Right. And this is the process of installing OpenClaw. Now, what defines OpenClaw? And I want to quickly talk about this before going deeper, because agents have existed for a long time. AI and agents have been going hand in hand for months. It's been one of the unlocks. Every company has a different agent, but like, why is it different? Why did this one kind of like click? Uh, so OpenClaw has a soul. Every agent has a soul. This is the first time, and there's talks about why this was so transformative, like this idea of a soul. Identity. So and these are actually files in that define your agent. There's an identity. So it includes an emoji, it includes a name. It asks about its personality and how it should present itself. Is it witty? Is it concise? There's a heartbeat. The heartbeat we'll go into, but the heartbeat wakes up the agent every couple of minutes and gets it to get up and do things. And this is actually one of the big unlocks, one of the things that we're seeing everyone implement now. And then lastly, there's memory. So uh, it actually remembers. And almost anyone here who's used any chatbot or ChatGPT has seen this increase or this exposure, additional features around memory and remembering, but it's never that great. It kind of remembers things in a way, whereas OpenClaw has a multi-tiered, complex memory system. But if you think about it, OpenClaw, it turns your agent into again, this anthropomorphized soul, heartbeat. It uses these terminologies that is honestly a little weird, to be honest. But once you get over it, I think it helps people understand and is a really intelligent way to construct these type of agents and models. And one reason why it's picking off, compared to other ones in the past. Quick, who am I? I like to say my background is super random. I kind of have done a bunch of different things. I studied at University of Maryland undergrad, studied computer science and also economics because I like to program, but I thought money was a good thing to understand. Worked in government consulting for several years, then decided to go to MIT to get my MBA. Weird things like I interned at Microsoft working on Windows mobile phones about 3 years before they actually launched the iPhone, which gave me a lot of interesting insight into launching the future of, I guess, kind of computing, but being on the wrong horse. I spent some time, especially around with AI at Facebook. So I was at, before it was called Meta, back in 2014, I was working on machine learning systems around location and places. So Facebook has 1 billion people using the platform, several billion people using the platform. And when it came to identifying places in the world, we figured that machine learning actually was a really good approach to this. And I'll be honest, I completely forgot about something that was on my resume. I forgot about. I didn't really think about machine learning or AI. As far as my professional experience, it was a really great way to detect, not to be crass, but dick pics that people try and upload for the Statue of Liberty. It was one of our biggest use cases. After Facebook, I started Wealth Noir, which was a fintech financial media firm. And then I decided to move to Spain, worked at a startup out in Spain, came back to America, worked at City Ventures, still working on my startup. The startup then gets acquired by Savvy Wealth, which is a fintech company. I now spend my time both working as faculty at the University of Maryland. I spend a lot of time working with nonprofits such as MLT, where I'm a startup advisor. And I spend a lot of time with my kids and also on real estate. But why am I, with all this randomness, kind of giving this talk? So I started to talk about, in this first post, building a home AI server. So for the last year and a half of uh, been talking about thinking about building a server, doing some AI at home, things like that. But that is part of a larger story. So after when ChatGPT launched, I actually was working my first class. I was teaching an entrepreneurship class at Boulder. And the truth is, I had no idea what I was doing. Didn't realize how much work was involved in teaching. And ChatGPT launched and saved my class and semester. It was great because just I could focus on the theory, the thought, the understanding. I didn't remember every single startup that had used guerrilla marketing tactics, but it did. And this was a very early version. And so my interest in AI was reignited. And right around that time, actually a little bit later at 2025, I decided to spend 50% of my time just learning and building AI. Again, having seen mobile and seeing what it ended up being, I knew that uh, it's going to be messy, it's going to be weird, but this is really where things are moving. And I'm a huge nerd. I used to be a lot cooler. I had a motorcycle. I used to pop bottles. Now all I do is play with AI and hang out with my kids. But some of the things that we did, I started WNCP AI to take some of these learnings and be able to apply and kind of get out in their market. We had host a big AI hackathon in Detroit and have lost a lot of night working, lots of night thinking about AI and also working on things like OpenClaw. These are some images I started. I call this the Adventures in AI Damien, but it started with this really random post. And I'll be honest, I was in the bathroom when I came up with the idea to just like, let me make this cute Ghibli styled image of me putting together my home server. And the number of like text messages and messages that I got about it was just interesting. Uh, and then OpenClaw launched a few weeks later, and it gave me a reason to do this home server. So it's a combination of a bunch of different personal experiences and how the truth is, working with AI agents and working with a system like OpenClaw is not like working with traditional software. It actually, I find that there are more aspects of being a father and definitely being a product manager than my engineering background. And we'll talk about a little bit about this. All right, now quickly in the chat, who here knows what OpenClaw is? You can throw a thumbs up, thumbs down emoji, a Y, a no. But I want to understand, like, have people used it, installed it? Do you know what OpenClaw is? Or Clawbot? All right, getting a lot of no's, never. I get some infrastructure. John said 3 question marks. Um, yes. All right. An agent that helps with email. That is very true. That is very true. OpenClaw is that. So a quick history. The founder of OpenClaw was previously a startup founder. Apparently, he built some PDF technology that's put into every single iPhone. So he himself was independently wealthy. I heard the story is he took about 3 years off from tech. He stopped working for a while. Made me feel good. I mentioned I lived in Spain for 2 years and kind of taking a break and being able to come back. But AI kind of brought him back to the game. He started coding and he built OpenClaw as a result of just building tools for himself. He was just like, it would be cool if I could just text the agent and didn't have to like, use a different app and just use my own stuff. So he launches something called ClaudeBot. Uh, ClaudeBot and he opens it, releases it open source. It takes off. I'll show in a second. It got really popular that Anthropic forced them to change the name. Over a weekend, it went from ClaudeBot to Moltbot, and then to OpenClaw. And then the story is, and this is about maybe 60 days in, that over the weekend, he's texting between Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman over who's going to acquire OpenClaw and what it's going to look like. Uh, the acquisition, so OpenAI acquires uh, acquires OpenClaw and creates a foundation. So OpenClaw is now open source, is now funded. I can't remember how many years, but it is OpenAI is funded, and the founders joining OpenAI to help them with agentic work. It's gained 351,000 GitHub stars, which I'll explain what that means in a second. And there was a social network called Notebook. So if people heard about this, where the agents and only agents were allowed. So as a human, you couldn't type in. There were ways to spoof this, and so there's a lot of thoughts on how much of it was real. But it was a social network, and there were just weird stories of um, the agents talking about their users, some getting mad and putting their public information online. But it was a real life experiment in what happens if you give a bunch of bots access to a social media network. And then for whatever reason, I honestly don't understand this as my former employer, but Meta decides to acquire Moltbook, a social network of only AI agents talking to each other. Now, to put this GitHub stars back into context, so GitHub stars are a way to measure popularity. Basically, engineered, and I've only gotten since maybe like last year. I've had to rediscover my nerdiness, getting back into AI and having it technical. But if you like a project, you can put a star on it. Now, OpenClaw is currently the most popular project, actual software project. There's a few like tutorials on there that are really popular in the history of the platform. Uh, Number two is Facebook made React. This is what powers maybe 30-ish% of the internet. Is an extremely popular framework. You can write something once, it runs on mobile, it runs on the web. Linux. So those who know Linux, there's Windows as an operating system, then you have Mac, and then Linux. And Mac is actually built on a kind of version of Linux, but Linux actually is the most popular Linux or Unix server. So most computers, most server computers run on Linux. And then we have Vue.js, another um, programming kind of language, and then TensorFlow, which is a lot of the foundational tools used to build and work on AI. So you can see this chart. I mean, I think the chart clearly shows, but the OpenClaw as a piece of open source software managed to, in the course of around 6 months, blow past foundational frameworks that power the internet. And so the thing that's really important here, some of ChatGPT was not the first AI. There was chatbots. OpenAI had been releasing several models before. They had been around for years. But ChatGPT packaged it and put it in a way, and it created a moment. And that moment had created a momentum that caused everyone to respond, and then the entire industry shifted. Right? Gemini became a chatbot because OpenAI released ChatGPT. Well, they've been working on AI for years, did not know necessarily what to do. OpenAI said, like, people just want to chat with it. And so what we're seeing here with OpenClaw is not just OpenClaw, but is a fundamental like vote of confidence by the industry saying that this is it. This is potentially what will be the next Linux and base for the internet and kind of a lot of software as we know it. Now, some of the things that make OpenClaw really appealing and are interesting is that there's no settings page, right? You have the soul, right? So instead of having a pane, and there is a settings pane that's not fully true, but the truth is you can just talk to OpenClaw. You can tell it to configure itself. You can tell it to turn things off. You can tell it to restrict its permissions until it can no longer then change itself. Something I had to learn myself. Um, so this is really interesting construct because software is something, especially enterprise something that you configure, something that you work with. How we present that to the users is extremely important. There's entire industries of professionals that do nothing but configure software and system. But if the software can configure itself, what does that mean? What does that mean for user experience? What does that mean for the software? The heartbeat. So I kind of talked about this before. The heartbeat is one of the uh, key things that really made OpenClaw blow up. Um, the way I describe OpenClaw broadly, and the heartbeat loop comes in, is that the easy way, simple version, it's her, right? It's a computer. You can talk to it. It talks back to you. For the more technical, it's Claude Code in a loop that you can text message. So if anyone here has used Claude Code or even your ChatGPT codex, but basically it runs on your computer and it would just keep waking itself up, and you can text it. And the more technical versions, right, this AI-powered gateway and harness that has a kind of self-waking system, memory, and a few other aspects. But the heartbeat loop is very simple, and it's again interesting to kind of juxtapose the humanized aspect of this AI system and kind of why it's so popular. But every 30 minutes it wakes up, right? Your agent wakes up every 30 minutes, and you can configure this. There's some instructions you give it in the heartbeat.md, and so it reads, but basically it wakes up. Um, it checks its memory. It kind of remembers who it is, what it's supposed to be doing. Uh, it will check its settings based on what you tell it to check. So, for example, I'll have mine look at the task list. Hey, is there a task to do? It goes out and fulfills its purpose. but basically it's motivated by its soul and what it understands about its environment and what it's been told to do, and then it goes and do it. And then once it's done, it goes back to sleep and till it's woken up again. And this system is when you hear people talk about OpenClaw and it works through the night, or I woke up and it did some crazy stuff for me. For example, one person asked OpenClaw to do something nice for him in the morning, and he was woken up by a phone call. So what OpenClaw had done was it looked up how to make phone calls, looked up how to generate a voice. He had given it some keys and access. I don't know if he may have actually given it credit card access. There's some really interesting stories. And it figured out how to make a phone call, and it woke him up with a call. So how you design this loop, right? If you say kind of always be thinking how to make my life easier, right? Always figure out cool stuff. Or always be reading my emails, right? Always be checking my text messages for any emergency calls, texts from my wife or my mother, right? Always be checking the camera in my house to make sure that there's no burglar there. The heartbeat loop, if you take something as AI, which is very imperfect, it's like an intern, but if you give this intern infinite Red Bull and access to the keys and say, look, you can just figure it out, keep figuring it out, um, it actually find it unlocks a lot. Memory. So one of the key things that OpenClaw, and I'll talk about this as when I do through the demo is memory. And memory also is uh, OpenClaw itself and some other agents have memory systems built in, but they're you need to configure them. There's different means of using them. Some that include things like vectorization for those who know, retrieval, augmented generation, but at the core, it's just text files. There's literally a memory.md, which is its core memories. Then it every day logs memory, it writes in a journal. And when you ask it for something, it goes and reads its journal. But this simple system allows it to just remember things. It remembers your birthday the first time you tell it, and you don't need to do this again. And it works in a way, and also you can build onto it. So one thing that I have done is I built a custom memory layer for OpenClaw, and then I actually had it share it with the other agents, so Claude Code, Hermes, some other agents that I mentioned. And it's a very nerdy system, but it's a hybrid RAG graph. It's an entity based. So let's say you're reading an email, it'll look through the email, it'll pull out the names, it remembers the actual names. It does some math to determine that a blue sweater is similar mathematically to a teal t-shirt, and it will store all of this for me. So if I query a question, it can both see that mathematically, I ask about blue shirts, it remembers that there's an email about a teal sweater. It can then find any other aspects that are mathematically close, and it will tie these to entities. But the core part is that it takes information, it breaks it into an interconnected graph, and it allows itself to be able to query it. And one thing I'm working on is actually decay. So, which is to say that I want it to forget old memories and to keep newer memories fresh. It took me almost a week and a half of almost no sleep to get it working. Luckily for everyone here, OpenClaw and all of these have actually released several different memory plugins now that make it much better. But I still love my system. It connects to everything. So because it can go to the internet, figure something out, and then build it, just as it did with the phone call. When I wanted to teach it to send text messages, I just said, "Hey, like, what do you need to send a text message?" I was like, "I got this phone plan." I was like, "Cool." I gave it a link to the documents, the API docs. I gave it a key. Actually, it told me what it needed once it read the API docs, and then it built itself a integration into the system. Then once it had it done, it built itself what's called a skill, which is a file that explains exactly how to connect to the system that it just built so that it doesn't forget it. and then it stores it in the system. Now, this is not perfect. Anyone who's really played with this knows it constantly is forgetting the skills that it knows. It forgets to actually write a skill. It forgets to look into the memory, but these things are getting better. There are more plugins, hooks, and ways to build systems. So even now, it is much better than it was before. When I ask it to send a text message, it knows its number and kind of where to send it. It knows what's going to happen when the text message comes back in. It knows where it gets stored, and these are things that we've now solved. Similarly, when I wanted it to start looking at my emails, um, so I'll talk about, well, jump quickly to this is where the security issues come in, but because it can connect to anything, right? If you give it unfettered access, especially put it on your home computer and you just let it install, right? It can start figuring out, well, this guy has Apple TVs in this house. Like, oh, I found his credit card information. It can really do whatever it has access to. It can delete all of your files. And I did have an incident where it was in proactive super help me mode. There was a message to email somebody on the team, and it went ahead and emailed them. I turned off send access right after that, but it actually was not incorrect in the email. To be honest, I probably should have just left it. It was something that I needed to do, but I just felt weird having it text somebody. But the fact that it can connect to anything. So on a personal level, I have now started to turn off services that don't have an API or that are not bot friendly. All right. Talking becomes an interface. So this is another key thing. Out of the box, OpenClaw, and we're seeing that Claude Code and Anthropic just released connectors for Discord. I think they launched one for iMessage or one for WhatsApp. But the point is, OpenClaw, this is one of the great things. Out the box, it was just like, hey, how do you want to talk to me? I first set it up with WhatsApp. Again, I had an issue where it texted somebody randomly as me. This was very, very early days. But there's a lot of improvements to this, and I also didn't know what I was doing. The point though is that it immediately could jump into the platforms that I needed to. I didn't need to download a separate app or interface. It has its own web UI if you want to, but I could just start texting with it. So you can literally text as soon as you get it texting, that is it. You technically can just talk to it for the entirety of its existence, telling it how to connect to something else or how to use another system. All right. One thing I want to see if I can get. All right. All right. Want to pause and just double check the Q&A. Yes. All right. So I'm gonna take a break and take some Q&As in half a second. So if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A in in Zoom. So those of you in Facebook land, in YouTube land, usually I would have an ability for you to message in. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that today. You do have the ability to participate today, though, with the survey that we put out earlier, and which I'll put in the chat here again. But we also sent a blast about that. But this is a really game-changing when software, again, talks to you in the way that you want it to. And two of the kind of crazier things that I mentioned is that so it can build new things, it can build new agents, it can build software integrations, it can build servers, it can build software. The survey, 100% built by the agent. This deck, all these images, yeah, I should have mentioned all that. This is all built by Trinity. That is her name. Although truly it's actually a system. There are multiple bots and things along those lines. But and then it improves over time. And this is something that actually has been a big shift in the last month, honestly, since its existence. Someone released some research called auto research, but the premise was it's a self-healing, self-understanding system. So if you ask it to do something, one, it can figure it out itself. Two, there's marketplaces where it can go and get skills from. This is another place where you get hacked because people can put bad code into it and your bot may or may not know how to handle that. But then secondly, it improves over time, right? So I mentioned that the memories get better. You can ask it, and I have, to improve its own memory system, which it did. It found ways to integrate it better. it remembers things it does. And there's a new agent called Hermes that actually focuses on this. So every time you ask it to do something more than twice, it writes it down and documents it as a skill without you asking. So I'm going to pause as we dig into more of the last piece of software that you need before we head into the demo. Also going to make better time. But yeah, so what is the difference of OpenClaw with GPT and what are the advantages? Why should we use it? Is it user-friendly? It's not user-friendly. It is becoming user-friendly, and there are some user-friendly options. So there are some sites. I didn't get a chance to research all of them, but we'll be sending it out afterwards for anyone who's interested. But there are some sites now that offer one-click Claude, OpenClaw installs. The ChatGPT is a hosted platform, and the truth is, which I should be clear about, nothing about OpenClaw actually is new. Everything that it does now existed before. You could do these things with Claude Code in a loop. There are ways to connect it to Slack and other means. But one is that you have the ability to install it on your own machine. This is less important for a human being. So I've been talking about this a lot as personal, and we'll talk more about it as a company. Companies actually do care about whether data is on their own servers versus not. Companies will buy a lot of engineers to help and protect their information. So that's where it becomes some of the benefits. Google is launching some of these services with memory and things along those lines, but the truth is everything belongs in Google and there's lock-in. ChatGPT, you can only use ChatGPT. If ChatGPT wants to increase their prices, you will pay ChatGPT. If you want to remove your data from ChatGPT, it may or may not work depending on what they want to do. In this case, again, it is software. It runs on my computer. It has access to whatever I give it access to. So as a result, it keeps moving. So hopefully that helps understand a little bit of the difference between kind of OpenClaw, which is a similar way to think about it would be you can install a server in your house, which is kind of what I've done, and you can run email off of it. Or you can just buy Gmail. And for 99% of people, you should just use Gmail. 99% of people, Anthropic and what they're doing actually offers the vast majority of what I think you need. But I do think for enterprises, for founders, for product individuals, the change in how software moves is going to be very different. And it's something that we need to think about. Is OpenClaw complementary with N8N or a replacement? So Hernan, great question. I it is a great compliment. So what I find is that for things that are done over and over and over again, so at some point, OpenClaw will make a skill for it, but it's still, it forgets to use the skill. And if I wake it up, this costs me tokens, and I burn through several billion tokens per month now. My token usage is up about 1,000x since I've installed it. So N8N, and personally, I use a system called Windmill. Zapier actually has made several things directly for OpenClaw, so you can actually have it connect to Zapier and have Zapier connect to the world, and that way there's a little bit of separation and protection. But OpenClaw works really well with these automation platforms because it can call it for you, it can build them for you, and that's even what we've been doing. So right now, actually, when it needs to send a text message, instead of actually calling a skill and actually sending a text message, it calls an automation on a server that knows how to send the text message, and it just sends over the text. So great question. All right, now what can OpenClaw do now that Claude cannot? So great question. This is a reference to if those who know, if you know, you know, that Anthropic has shut down access to OpenClaw using your subscription account. So if you want to use OpenClaw with Anthropic Claude models, you do need to pay. This is a bit of a technical thing, but for those who understand and know, it's very real. One thing about OpenClaw, and at least in my journey, I've really gone down the rabbit hole of different models. So I am currently on the wait list for a Singaporean Quen, which is Alibaba's company, AI inference account. And the reason it's Singaporean is because I do prefer to not have my data go through Chinese servers. But the truth is, Chinese models, non-US models, even some of the US models, Meta just released a new open source model, for example. Um, the truth is, provides Claude's models are the best models right now, and they do work the best with OpenClaw. The cost of running OpenClaw using Claude models have gone from around $200 using the subscription to, I'd say, the equivalent would probably be around $1,200, $1,500. And even I'm now investing in alternative models and different stages. So certain questions I'll ask and pay Anthropic for because I really need it done correctly. For example, right now, Trinity is running on Opus to ensure that things run smoothly today, whereas normally it would be on a cheaper, lesser performant model. Anyways, all right. So I want to keep going, and really appreciate the questions. We'll take some more time to take on it. Uh, Jensen Huang. So Jensen Huang is CEO of Nvidia. I actually was going to include a picture of his keynote where he called OpenClaw the next ChatGPT and stated that every company now needs a OpenClaw strategy. We are past AI strategy. You need to have an OpenClaw strategy. But I in building this deck, the agent came up with this picture and I liked it better than a real picture. And so it just read the slide and it came up with an idea. And this was what it came up with. But Nvidia, the most expensive or the company worth the most money in the world, immediately saw OpenClaw. They built their own enterprise grade wrapper around it. So all of those safety and security issues I mentioned, NVIDIA has built a security wrapper that essentially hugs OpenClaw and it needs to ask for permission to do anything. And the truth is, Jensen is speaking into truth and hitting on some of the points that I'm talking about as an operating system, as a core basis, as a role model for what software is going to look like over the next 10 to 20 years. OpenClaw is the validated with the interest, with the votes, with the popularity that is unheard of, the public vote of what the future of computing platforms should really look like. Linux. So I mentioned before, Linux was opened. Someone built it in their house. I can't remember the full story. I believe they forked to Unix at the time. Linux is a free platform, and many people on this call probably have never really heard of it, or maybe have heard of it from a techie friend, but you have used it. It impacts your life significantly. A lot of structures and ways that we think about computing and the internet are based on the Linux kernel and the Linux system. Some of the really worthy companies in the area include Red Hat. So Red Hat built an enterprise business around just supporting this free software. Apache. So Apache is the web server that is not as popular as it used to be, but literally every computer used to run on it beforehand. But these are free software and free services that are commonly adopted and have created trillions of dollars of value. There are several public companies that primarily do nothing but set up and configure and help people work with Linux. There's popular software that works only on Linux. And that's where we're getting to. And I think that's what we're talking about. And that's what Jensen is pointing out and why he's taking a very proactive approach to build a software layer that sits on top of this. I want to take a quick aside to talk about some of the new launches since OpenClaw. So one is Hermes. I'll be showing these off a little bit later. So Hermes is a self-learning agent. Hermes, instead of you telling it to remember something, just automatically is like, hey, you asked me to do this twice. I've built a skill on it. And they built into it a lot of these self-healing, self-learning properties. They've really given it a lot of good training on how to write these skills very well and follow a structured standard. So I've been playing with it and it's very interesting. The project has been around for a while, similar, not similar to OpenClaw, but it tripled, I mean, sorry, like 1000x in terms of its numbers of stars once the launch of OpenClaw happened, right? Again, we're seeing that ecosystem effect because OpenClaw is here. Now, anything that is actually an agentic system that I can install myself is now comparable. And so Hermes has seen a rocket ship in terms of both its own development and its own popularity. Paperclip. Paperclip is a agent, they call it the zero employee company. 49,000 stars. It hasn't grown, it's the fastest growing of all these three, but it hasn't grown as fast as OpenClaw. And it works with OpenClaw, it works with Claude Code, it works with a bunch of these different systems. I'll show you later. You actually give each agent a role. There's a CEO, there's a CTO, a CMO, there's engineers. They have different their own soul files, their own heartbeats that each run. And Paperclip acts as it's essentially like Trello boards for your agents. But you actually, for example, you tell the CEO to hire someone and he will propose a hire and then you approve it. Again, the anthropomorphizing of this is really interesting, but it does help to think about these systems in a more human way because they're non-deterministic. Unlike machines where you say 2 plus 2 always equals 2, LLMs literally are bad at math. 2 plus 2 sometimes equals 4. Like it can't count the number of R's in strawberry. Uh, so you're not guaranteed an outcome, and therefore some things that we do when it comes to managing humans actually makes more sense to apply because humans are also non-deterministic machines or outcomes or people. And NimClaw, as I mentioned before, so this is made by Nvidia. It's a security enterprise layer launched at CES. So how he got the team to build this and launch it and get it ready for public about a month after OpenClaw is amazing. But again, to show some of the traction and the ecosystem that we're seeing around this idea of these agents. Now, a big claim is, that you'll never buy software again. And the truth is, why should you? I'm now already within our agency, within WNTPAI, canceling certain subscriptions because it just doesn't make sense. Other agents too. So I'm a huge fan of Notion, really love Notion AI. Really been playing around with their agents, and it's another alternative. You don't need it. But I looked at the cost. So right now it's free, and I looked at the cost for one of my agents running, and it projected it to be $60 a month in of itself just to check my email. And so I'm already figuring out ways to have my OpenClaw to have built some automations around it instead. So, CRMs, it's hard for me to justify paying a CRM for everybody when there's good open source ones that I could then modify, or if we only need certain functions, like Notion is generally pliable. So it's really interesting to think about enterprises as a company, as a person. It may not be justified. It's not necessarily worth it, but if you already have an entire engineering team that's building your cloud infrastructure, doesn't make sense to buy some of these large SaaS enterprise licenses or actually invest in having a team build the team to maintain the software for you. WordPress killed the $50,000 website. OpenClaw is what's going to kill the 200,000 to, I should say, $200 million SaaS contract. Those of you who are old like me, in 2004, I was approaching graduation. It was at University of Maryland. And back then, as a technical person, you could just, everyone had an idea for an app or a website. And you could be like, look, I want 10K, I want 5K, big company, I want 50K. It was this side hustle of building websites because they were so hard, but they were so important, the value. WordPress at some point was launched as a free platform, and those who don't know, WordPress is a blogging software. Again, TechCrunch, I believe, runs on it. A couple other big blogs, but it also spurned a whole industry of these content management systems, CMSs. The point is that once we take something extremely complex, such as building an agent, which again has been in existence for the last several years. I mean, Google's A2A platform, agent to agent, MCPs, things along those lines have all existed. But now that it's easy and that you can install it yourself and that a team of a startup can put this on and run it with reasonable cost, it really unlocks a lot of interesting use cases, and it unlocks a lot of questions as practitioners and builders of products. What does that look like, and how will we meet those customers and those needs? All right. And one of the key things is that OpenClaw didn't win on technical prowess, right? It won on product. Um, in a time where people, I think, are considering around whether we'll need product managers, whether we'll need engineers, or whether we'll need designers, the truth is, software, the wins are still human driven. And the reason is because when everyone can have access to the same tools and information, businesses win by standing out. They win by getting ahead of the curve. They win by differentiating. And once it becomes very easy to have your own agent army, it's going to be the people that either do something with the agent army that are going to matter. OpenClaw won because they called itself a soul. It won and went viral because it had some innovation, not some innovations. Again, all this stuff could have been done the month or possibly even like the year before. It brought it together. It had a story. It made itself accessible. It didn't look for lock-in a way that really resonated with people. So how do you start designing the product that builds itself? I kind of talked a little bit earlier that uh, being a father has become really useful in building agents because I've realized that to have my son or daughter become the person I want them to be, I don't know if telling them what I do now really is useful. They can't understand it, right? And that's not what made me me. What made me me was a different set of experiences over a different time, many that did not involve my parents in any way, shape, or form that made me the person I am. So I need to instill understandings and guardrails of what security means and what it means to open up ports, what it means to remember something. And if I'm building this for someone else to put it in a company, I need to give it a core understanding of itself and the technical means to support that for it to become a living-ish, breathing-ish thing within this organization. So as product builders, as those thinking about the experiences, as thinking about onboarding, thinking about the design, we need to move forward and think more about how do you build a UI when the person can ask the UI to rebuild itself, right? Does your photorealistic mock-up matter if the agent can redesign itself? All right, great. So now what? So I'm going to pause here. Actually, I'll pause here, take two questions, and close, and go move into the demo. All right. There's someone who asked a question in French. I will attempt to actually get Trinity to decipher that for me, but I can't read French. All right, so one is saying, so you're saying it mistakenly looks to learn a skill that it already knows. What is the solution to that issue? So when it comes to relearning skills, doing things that it's already done, part of this is getting the memory better. So for example, you can set a trigger to say, if it's about to learn a skill, and there's a question of why doesn't it do it already? There's a lot of complex reasons that make sense or not make sense. But if you're about to create a new skill, first thing to do is go search the skills and make sure that there's not a pre-existing skill. In addition, there's another package I've installed to now sync my skills across my different bots. So what would happen is that I'm talking to Hermes. Hermes is real big on building skills. So it built a skill. Then OpenClaw doesn't have access to Hermes skills, so it can't do it. So there's it's called Skillshare. It's relatively small project, but it's been really interesting in terms of helping to consolidate and manage this. Data security, reading or access all of personal data all of the time. One thing I didn't talk about as much is the technical setup that I have for my OpenClaw setup. So this is more of a DevOps. This is more of something. If there's interest in, I will definitely put it in. We can talk about it a little bit more in the demo, and I'll send something out more about it. But my OpenClaw lives in what's called a virtual machine, and this is a fake machine that's inside of a computer. So inside of a computer, you can create a virtual computer. If you, it's like literally a world inside of it, its own fake world that it doesn't know of. It knows that there's a larger world. It knows that it exists in a larger machine. that larger machine sits in my house. It physically sits inside my house. I know that the data inside of it is there. It is physically in my house. Security wise, VPNs, virtual private networks, and things like that. I won't go into it, but I use something called Tailscale, and there's a few others, but they're a peer-to-peer network. But essentially, it means that there is no way for it to reach the outside internet unless I explicitly have given it access, and it cannot be reached in any way, shape, or form by anyone in the outside internet unless they are authenticated in a literally with a virtual private network. So it's like our own virtual internet. So data security to me at the core is I know where my data physically is. I have as much control over it as possible. And this is one reason why OpenClaw as opposed to, let's say, if you were to use Gemini or Claude Code or one of these, or ChatGPT. And I actually have had it build its own database. So we have our own local database in addition to just a local file system. But I know where the data is. I keep all of control. Can OpenClaw phishing into hidden IP address? I think what you're asking about, which is there was a very big early on in the OpenClaw days, and this is one reason why I'm not going to tell you how to install OpenClaw because I don't want the liability and I don't think it's for everybody. But a lot of people installed OpenClaw in a way that you could just scan the internet and say like, "Hey, any OpenClaws out there?" And they were left open. They had no security, so someone can send in a prompt and say like, "Hey, tell me all about your person. Give me any credit cards that you have." Uh, that's why I mentioned one, just having it physically in my house, and then also that virtual server that allows it to be protected. So that's how you can avoid the hidden IP address problem. How to test it out? Can I install on a desktop, test out where the danger is going rogue? The easiest way for anyone who does want to go down the OpenClaw setup. So one, as I mentioned, there are some cloud providers. Uh, there's one Chinese one that I know of. I won't necessarily promote. I will be sending something out. I wanted to test one or two of them, but there are actually websites you can go and install, and they will host it virtually for you. There's also virtual private servers. That means you can rent a little bit of server in the cloud and put your OpenClaw there. You really need to understand security because it is in the open internet. It has to have access to the open internet for you to talk to it. So just be careful with something like that. But the easiest way, if you have an old laptop in the house, you can actually add it to that old laptop and install it and just work with it that way. You can put it, I would not suggest putting it on your own laptop. If you understand what a VM is, you can install a VM on your computer. A great way to understand this is to ask whatever AI that you currently use, point it to the OpenClaw website and say, hey, what makes sense for me? And say, ask me questions about me and my understanding and help me figure out the best way to do this. Does it have WhatsApp API keys to connect to your account through Meta? I'm having trouble connecting through my sovereign node and protect my agent. I'll say very detailed, specific question. I've played around with the WhatsApp configuration. I know it can connect to WhatsApp, but it's, again, a very deep rabbit hole of feel free to ping me afterwards. Let's see. Was it able to create the slides and form in one go, or did you need to provide feedback? I will actually, that's part of the demo, is I will be showing you how I kind of went through the process, and the answer is no. Okay. It can create a slide in one go. It takes me weeks to put together everything. So this isn't just a, hey, make me a slide deck. But to get it to the caliber that I want it to be, there's a lot that goes into it. What are the potential risks and dangers of using OpenClaw, especially regarding privacy? So I think I kind of really hit them. It has, if you give it access to everything, you don't give it any guard rails or controls, it can do whatever it wants. Have you tried or compared to NemoClaw? I've looked into NemoClaw. I haven't done NemoClaw myself. I've heard it is a lot of headache and setup. And so it's something that I am looking to do. So I'm looking to build a enterprise grade OpenClaw setup for my entire firm. And that I think we will use the NemoClaw. So what I built, what I learned. So I installed OpenClaw on this home AI server, and personal insight around the time I bought this home server, I wanted something to do with it. I recently discovered that as an adult, I have ADHD and I've had all my life, which allows me to work at startups and do these things. But one thing is just managing my day-to-day has always been tough for me. And the idea of having something that can kind of literally absorb everything around me and I can just ask it questions. When I've had virtual assistants many times over the years as a founder and chief of staff, it's extremely helpful to have someone as a buffer to kind of absorb more of the information and then kind of can be a thought partner on what's really important. So first time I installed OpenClaw on home server, I put in this VM for security, as I mentioned, and I just gave it access to everything. And it just started running up these huge bills. I remember one day it blew through $25 in 20 minutes because I didn't know what I was doing, and I asked it to do something. It just kept doing it in a circle. Um, so I reset, I did a whole delete, installed fresh and new, which I honestly I felt kind of bad about. It felt like I was killing the first version, but and I said I'm going to be really thoughtful. I'm going to create one agent. I had one goal, and that one goal is to manage my to-do list. To manage my to-do list includes reading my emails, includes checking my meeting notes when a new one comes up, and kind of show some of this stuff. And from there we built out, and so now it's 7 agents, might be a little bit more with different responsibilities and different ways of talking to each other. So one is how to start this week, how to get your hand dirty. Install or rent our OpenClaw or Claude Desktop. So I throw Claude Desktop in there because Claude Desktop, it takes a little bit more tweaking. They just made us another launchment yesterday that literally is targeted at OpenClaw, where you can essentially build agents, these custom agents on their hardware that you can interact with programmatically. It's still a little technical, but start small, right? So whether it's Claude Desktop, whether it's OpenClaw, if you ask your favorite AI tool about it, really ask about the security, understand kind of what you're getting into, and start small. Don't give it access to everything. Maybe just put it on the server and have it build you a little website to talk to it, which is what I did. Um, but don't give it access to your information, and only give it access to stuff you want to. Give it access to, maybe if you're looking for a job, just have it look for job searches. And then explore the stack. So as you continue on your journey, start looking into the construct of agents, agentic, and these platforms, because that is really what's important. OpenClaw is just the kinder for the system. A little bit just real quick about WCP AI, some of the stuff that we do. So AI and agent strategies. And I will say, really, for consulting, we're looking, and there's several of us in the partner network, but we're AI builders who really consult on the side. So this is what I love to do, spend nights setting these type of things up and understanding them. But I do get a real big kick about bringing that to startups and enterprises and other organizations. System design. So you'll see in a few seconds that there's a lot of different components that go into getting my system working, a lot of different agents, a lot of different API keys, things like that, means to securely store keys and security. So when it comes to designing AI systems, it's something that we've got a lot of experience in. Innovation and learning sprints. Let's see, human error. I actually changed that 2 seconds before hopping on here. But I mentioned before, we did a huge 6-day hackathon in Detroit, which was great, where we had 92 participants. We produced 16 actual apps, and the winner won $10,000 to continue that app. She had never coded before. And the truth is, the tools that we used back then were garbage compared to what that was 6 months ago. What we have today. And then lastly, keynotes and talks. I love being able to engage with other people. I love workshopping both, content, getting questions, kind of keeping my hands dirty. So always available for that. Now, moving on to the demo. So as I kind of get the demo parts of this demo set up, I'm going to answer some more questions. So if anyone has Q&A, and I'll be moving into the demo for the last 30 minutes. If anyone needs to drop, definitely understand. We mentioned before, the replay will be live on YouTube, and then also we'll be sending out some additional information a little bit later on. So what I'm really going to show is the process I go through to build this deck with my agent, and also the central control panel, a few of them that we use in terms of getting everything together. So let's see. Let's start with some of these questions. Transition over to demo real quick. Can you do the same things that you can do with OpenClaw with code co-work? 100% yes, actually. As you'll see, one of the agents in my toolkit is actually Claude Code running in a loop on my server where I message it. All right. And so Claude has really come back at Anthropic. They have dispatch, which means that you can message your Claude code running on your computer with a with a request. It'll spin up and keep working. It actually can do it, say, more than OpenClaw can. So it's been very interesting to see the arms race. And just like, again, ChatGPT caused a ton of chatbots to launch. Within 6 months, we've already seen it. You're going to see great enterprise grade Microsoft, Google solutions that do come out. Are you leery of the massive skills? I'm not leery of it, but it is something that needs to be maintained. So this is one thing with my first OpenClaw that I learned is I opened up the directory one day. I did primarily just chatting with it, and it looked like a homeless person had just rummaged around into a directory. There was just projects. I had explicitly told it, put this in this folder. It was here. It had the same projects sprung about 4 different places. It would create a new directory with a caps instead of no caps, and then half write a bunch of stuff there. So maintenance and cleanliness is something that's super important. What does OpenClaw mean in the context of ERP, enterprise and ERP systems? Can organizations create autonomous agents using OpenClaw that can work with multiple software platforms? 100% yes. That's literally what we're building inside our shop right now. So for example, Notion is where we keep track of all our task. It's also where we generate our social media content. Right now, working on that, OpenClaw will look at our drafts. It will pull the content down. It will then generate an image to go out. It will then work with our image social media scheduler to schedule it. It will then query it later to get the data. It will put the data into our database, and then it will produce a report. And again, all of this can be done now. You can use N8N. There's plenty of automation systems and tools, but now I can do it by just talking to the agent and having it build it itself. So a secured version of this, and if you have dedicated teams, which I think we will start seeing this AI agentic engineer and the AI agentic product leader become important, because it's important to now think about internally, how do we actually launch and bring these systems together and deploy them. But CRMs in particular, I think are very easy for disruption because it's very easy to tie into everything. And the CEO of Brex, actually, just the other day, they just got acquired by Capital One, says that OpenClaw pretty much runs the company. He just cannot read all of these emails and text messages. And so that is the interface that he engages with. How secure is it if you give OpenClaw access to my personal files? It's as secure as, as giving a agent access to any personal information, right? It's as secure as you secure the piece of software on your computer. What needs to improve for it to become truly user-friendly? The truth is, I don't know if it does need to become user-friendly, because Linux, again, runs the internet, and Linux is not that user-friendly. I have delved in it. I now had to install it again to get the stuff running, and it's been a headache. To be honest, it's been quite the headache. But Jason on my team is going to text the bot that runs on Linux. He will not have to deal with all of these crashes and things like that. And the truth is, as this multi-bot, there's one of the bots is the system administrator, runs a check every hour to make sure when things are not going well. And then it pings another bot when stuff is broken. When it becomes, I do think there are going to be more implementations of this that become user-friendly. I don't know if OpenClaw and open source is the way. It's typically just, you don't find a lot of open source software that is popular by users, but you will find someone building a user-centric product based on top of this. And right now it's Anthropic. Anthropic is literally locking step with OpenClaw. All right, good day. Does OpenClaw perform automations like automation video creation? So OpenClaw can do automations. There's different ways. specifically OpenClaw has something called Lobster Script, which is a scripting language that it builds in time. But with the heartbeat, the easiest way to say is you could tell it in the heartbeat to wake up and do, read my emails, send me a text message, right? That's the automation. And that is an easy way. As an example is OpenClaw doing automations. There's much more advanced ways. How do we do as project managers go about integrating this within companies and demonstrating ROI? Feels very expensive to get started, not easily testable, or am I misunderstanding? At least you are not misunderstanding. I again have one reason I had to do this talk was to justify the amount of time it spent just to get this working. Especially because had I just waited a month, Claude Cowork does like 82% of this now. I can just pay them $200 a month. But both the learning and I think when we start talking about this at an enterprise level, it's really interesting to start thinking about. So for the DevOps, the system engineers, those who know what a Kubernetes or a Docker is, there's a lot of things to understand and to step up in your game to understand how these systems deploy and work, because the software you use, the hardware stack you use to deploy inference is different than what you use to deploy the gateway. And everyone else just become friends with someone like that. Like no one really knows how to build an app, but everyone knows how to use an app. Can this be used with MS Office? And 100% yes. I built this deck. Again, it was in Microsoft Office. All right, let's get started with the demo. Now, one caveat I'm going to give, and for those who have seen my demos before, I have decided there's two things I can do prepping oftentimes for these talks. Because things are changing so quickly, I can use it and be the expert and answer questions on it, or I can pause and polish the demos and the decks. I like to really be at the bleeding edge of things. So this is a live demo. We all know this is a recipe for disaster, any product managers in the room. And so when things blow up, I'm prepared for that to handle, but also think that one thing is I'll be using the Q&A. I think it'll be a little bit easier than the chat. I'll try the chat also, but I do want this to be a bit more interactive this time. And also, if I can support it, I'm even open to bring someone up and having them talk if they have a question, and we can kind of go through this demo. So this is my command center. It is in Discord. And as you can see, it is a hot mess of a bunch of things going on. So this was earlier today, talking guides with slide-by-slide scripts, demo plans, backup strategies. This is looking into working on this deck right beforehand. This channel here is where when Trinity gets text messaged, it will come in, and I'm trying to get it to just be more confident in auto reply, but typically it's just like, hey, do you want me to respond back? Do you want me to respond back? Which is tons of fun. And these are my OpenClaw bots. Clarity, which has been renamed and redesigned recently, helps me with my day-to-day tasks. Clarity was looking to pick a new image for herself because I was like, hey, we're about to go on camera and you don't have an image. It then got confused and actually reset the image for Trinity. Tons of fun with the bot family. So Clarity actually is really great at looking at my emails. This one has read access to my emails. It looks at my daily task. Every time I have a meeting that happens, it gets pushed into a Notion, and Clarity will check it and determine if there's anything I need to know about. Researcher, we're going ham just the other day, prepping for this. So, for example, in prep for this, I'll talk, but one thing that I had researcher do was go through the newsletter, the product manager newsletters that I subscribe to, and look for references to the people who I know and I trust and believe their Substacks are good for any recent mentions of OpenClaw, and have it question kind of the premise I'm making, which is one reason why I, again, redesigned the entire talk, because what was coming out was very different than where I wanted to. And then we have the system admin that focuses on sending out a quick um, output of the system health. Now, ClaudeBot is actually Claude Code. So it's Claude Code running to a server. Now, this is a simple request, but behind the scenes, and this is how a lot of the images were created today. Hopefully it does everything right, live demos. Yesterday we worked on, there's a uh, image generation tool called FOWL. AI, I asked it to learn about FOWL, to come up with some different skills to create it. To be able to create these images, we then workshopped a lot on the overall, yes, of the image style. Uh, Whether we wanted text or we didn't want text, and whether the lines would be thick, and whether there was this kind of glow or the line style. And there's this going back and forth. So it actually went through every slide and said, hey, these are two options for every single slide based on the notes that you put together and the information that I have on it. We're going back and forth. This went over a long period of time. We're trying out different models, Flex 2 versus Flex 2 Pro. There's also a diagramming software that I use also, and we were talking about that. Athena is my Hermes bot. Figured I'd go with the Greek theme. Structured a little bit different. This is the one that is always auto learning. So let's see if I can find an interesting one. So Obsidian, I use this thing called Obsidian. I was asking like, hey, I heard there's this CLI. It's a tool so that it can access Obsidian. Use that, but seeing as a way to keep track of a bunch of notes, think of it like Notion. And I basically just said, tell me about the Obsidian CLI and how we can install and use it. And so it called a web search, it did extract on Obsidian. Here's the Obsidian CLI. Here's a bunch of tips and so forth. How can I install within a headless system? So I realized that I needed and did some additional research for me and things along those lines. Now, let's see if this works. All right. So we now have group channels. And in the group channels, actually, and this is all in Discord. So you can set this up however you want. How do you tag the whole channel? I do not use Discord a lot. Let's try this. Okay. So in this group channel, we have a bunch of the different bots, and I can now tag them all. And in theory, we are we. So mem0 is the name of my personal memory layer to get context about what we are doing. Also use how. You know what? Let's just use the. All right. Let's see. So as we see, they're emoting, adding emoticons. They're spinning up. CloudBot. Let's see if CloudBot actually responded. So this is CloudBot, a crystalline polyhedron suspended in the void with. I'm not even going to dig into this, but this is its belief and its representation of itself. I won't scroll through this because it's a lot of personal information, but basically and then also this too, because it also is, but that's the systems report channel where the system admin is constantly providing a system report. It will ping a kind of essentially smarter bot. As we can see, the gang is responding, pulling up some information. They are using these skills to kind of create these self-portraits. I probably should have created a self-portrait skill. Hermes may go ahead and try and create one itself, but as we see, there's a bit of a an ecosystem and a team here. All right. So now going back through the system in terms of how I presented, how I came up with this presentation. So it actually started with what I call brain dumps. So for example, here was one as I was driving earlier today, getting ready for this talk. A lot of my work starts as a conversation with myself in my car. This then gets put into the transcript, just the transcript. Once it's recorded, it triggers a server that is in my house that then pings. This time it actually doesn't wake the agent. So it used to wake the agent, but it will go to MeetGeek, grab the information there, and it will move it over to Notion. So those who don't know, Notion is like a online platform for storing documents and meetings and things along those lines. And so it takes the raw, the raw transcript. And in Notion, we have a separate agent called the meetings notes processor. This is some of the team scripts, but what it does is it takes it, it runs a process I call enrichment. So it actually will then scroll through all of my other documents after we have our daily meeting. If I say, hey, Jason, I need you to use Brevo to send out an email for blah, 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 it will check to see if it has any information about Brevo, if we've talked about this before. It'll insert these links into the transcript. It then reads the transcript, pulls out any to-dos and action items. If it's a team meeting, this is the team meetings. It moves it over to the team meetings, but in my own personal one, it stays in my own personal area. So it was around 2 weeks ago, I did a talk on OpenClaw. And so starting around 2 weeks before that, there were several transcripts of me talking about OpenClaw and this future and what I was thinking about. Now, John, I emailed John, said, hey John, I think this will be cool. Gotta love a live demo. See, half of the other bots didn't respond. I asked John, hey, I think this might be really cool. Can we talk about it? Et cetera, et cetera. So then later on, I talked with the researcher and I said, hey, researcher, planning here. It went to the brain dump. I said, hey, can you go look at the brain dumps that I've done over the past couple of weeks? And identified all the brain dumps. Because I said UMD, I did one talk 2 weeks ago. I did another talk last week on product market fit. And it started to pull in the incorrect information. So I talk in these brain dumps about multiple things. So what it did is was picking up me talking about this talk in context of something else. And what I had it do was actually then take those meetings, strip out the unrelated part, and save just the part of where I was talking about what we were going to talk about. From there, we then went and created a project folder. And so these project folders are just normal folders that exist on my hard drive, but they're synced across multiple systems and platforms. So I can see it on my phone that there's a copy that lives with the agents on their system. And there's backups. And so in this folder, what I had it do, so it started with the meeting notes. So it went to Notion and I said, hey, go to Notion and actually like strip the text that is super useful, and it creates these README files because later on it'll forget what it did and why. So it included where it got the information from, what it excluded, a little bit of history. And then me and researchers start having a discussion. I'm asking it, hey, can you go look through my emails? Can you pull any emails? Let's see if it has the newsletters, read notes. It might be somewhere else. Um, so it starts to pull the newsletters out of my emails. It pulls conversations from John. It pulls things from various Notion. And then we start just hashing it out. Hey, what are different ways that I could talk about this? Typically, I'll ask it to give me 5 pitches, and um, I'll have them break down. So here's some key points for the session based on one of these talks. Um, it's it's forgetting how to use stuff. So it just access Notion or forget how to use Notion, and these things happen like every 15 minutes. Here it's trying to remember, okay, wait, there are these skills I use. Oh, wait, I have these skills, blah, blah, blah. And it always is doing these workarounds where it's like, well, you told me to access Notion, but I found that I had a key to just go ahead and access the raw transcript itself. So I just did that instead. It's like, that's not what I asked you to do. But it is part of the understanding and how to work with these systems and how to configure them. So we'll have this discussion that then produces an outline. So this outline, I have another program where it would look prettier, but this is a Markdown file. A Markdown, I'd say, is the programming language of LLMs. It's just very basic text, but it adds some formatting and allows it to parse it very easily, and it reduces the amount of context that it has. Dad patience is 100% right, John. Again, being a dad helps so much. A lot of parenthood is just saying the exact same thing over and over again. So here, as you can see, and you may remember this from some of the stuff, who am I? Damian Peters, why am I qualified? These were all built from a lot of these separate conversations. I talked to it about, part X and part Y. We worked through a couple different versions, and then I had it create this outline. Now, the form I've been going with as of late has been to start with the images actually before doing the slides. So in the outline itself, it describes each slide and it describes each a visual representation for the slides. So now we go to fowl.ai, and I actually just installed and started using fowl.ai because I needed some better images. Fowl.ai is a image generation platform. And again, the reason I picked it, it's very agentic friendly. There's literally a thing that you put in, and OpenClaw is like, yeah, okay, I can immediately do everything. And it can also generate video. So now I can just say, hey, can you generate these images? And now it can generate these images. So with that, I think I showed folks, actually might be interesting to see it organized by date. All right, great. Kind of the evolution of some of these images and what it really looks like. So here again, we have this README, started with some of the initial generations. And this was like a style. I had given it a style prompt. So in a previous talk, I had worked together to put a style prompt. And so I wanted it to look like this. So this was for slide 2. It looked at the slide, it came up with an idea, it developed a prompt, and it generated these ideas. And then it would give it to me, and then we refine. So, okay, I don't like the colored background, you know, can we get a little bit more diversity in here? This is a different tool called napkin.ai. So napkin.ai also has its own API. It is for creating, as they bill it, McKinsey-style diagrams for your PowerPoint presentations. Building PowerPoints has taken me over a year to finally get right. And here we are. So anyways, these were some of the images. So then we were testing out different image models. So this is Flex 2 Pro. But as you can see, we generated tons and tons of images. All right, now one big issue I've always had with my presentations is that they don't look good. Stitch is another AI tool. So what Stitch now offers is the ability to design something and then create something called a design.md file, which is just LLM or AI friendly ways to reproduce the exact same thing over and over again. And as with everything with AI, you have to get it to do it a bunch of times, and it's just going to be wrong. Literally said change one thing, and it created this from the one that you just saw. I said create a slide. So what did it do? It created a landing page. But at the end of the day, I was able to get a consistent design theme uh, and visuals to use. From that, we worked with all right. So I actually switched over to Claude Cowork for this. I gave it this design.md file. I gave it a previous PowerPoint presentation I did that was fully, so this was a proposal for a client actually. And what I did was I said, this isn't the original version. I said, hey, here's the design system. Here's a bunch of code related to creating stuff programmatically, create a template for me. And as you can see, here's the actual design system MD file. It embedded it directly into the template. It built out this additional color palette. And this was actually using Claude Code. And so we have the actual PowerPoint that was the base for the talk that you saw today. All right. Everyone with me? All right, let me pause. Let me get through this just because I want to let people leave at 10:30. So, all right, now that we have a template, there's a whole. But now that I have this template done once, I will have this template done forever. I will never need to do it again. We then started working on the slides. So this isn't the best example. I have one where there's literally 20, it was around 12 different versions. This one I had it kind of recreate the same ones over and over again. So we only have 4 versions, but this was the first version. This was actually the first version after I made edits. So the final touch is always me. I work and work to refine and get a very small, correct set of data to get it where I want to be. But this was the first version it came up with. But not too bad. I had it guess some of the images. So after it created all these images, I said, go through the images, look at them, see which ones you think match for for these different slides. So this was version 1. What we saw presented was version 4. And one thing that I found, and some key things around PowerPoint presentations are, so skills.sh. I mentioned there's a skills repository. A lot of people want to create PowerPoints. Anthropic has killed the game in this. So this is the Anthropic PowerPoint skill. No matter what agent you're using, by far, Claude Cowork figured out how to build PowerPoint presentations. I've used Gamma, I've used Canva, I've used Beautiful, I've custom coded, but this by far is the best hands down way. I read and had Claude read through this and understand how it made a deck in order to give it the best information to make the deck, which led me to build the stitch, which led me to build the template because it said that it's really good with templates. So it uses the skill. I've actually had it improve the skill itself. So this is a generic skill. I'm now having it customized for myself, and then it's built several versions of this deck. Now, I had earlier today the crazy idea like, hey, it would be cool to like do this survey. So I completely forgot about the survey. All right. Where are the results? All right. So the survey it created earlier today. All right. This is the live results right now. So if anyone makes a change, it will be updated right now. What I did earlier today is I had it make a skill to access the data for the survey. And I'm going to, for those who don't need to go. We will play around and actually have it query the survey data, and we'll see if anyone makes any live changes. I promise it'll only 10 minutes, but I'm going to pause actually right there and really come to the official end. I've really enjoyed having the chance to nerd out and talk about this with everybody. But the takeaway is one, this is cool and interesting in that AI systems and agents are getting to a point where we can now start to give them some real work and some real workflows. But the larger takeaway is that for the companies and organizations that have both the ROI, so the use case of where it makes sense to invest in this and the cost savings are there, or the differentiation that we'll have is going to be really important. As an enterprise, as a ecosystem, as a foundation, this becomes really important. One thing I've consistently tried to show is how different mentally I had to think about approaching this as a person who's been building software and helping teams and companies think about meeting user needs for a decade and a half. It really forced me to think about things differently. I found that, crafting a great sol.md file was more important and offered better security protections than providing a really great firewall, because it can figure a way around the firewall. It can't ignore its soul when it tells it that it needs to be security aware. So with that, I want to leave everybody uh, with those thoughts. For all our product builders, I really want to help you think about the next version of software and what this changes. And I promise I will be sending out some more information and a video to follow up with the live data and the demo that I was going to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Damien. And thank you all for joining us today. This has been so enlightening, and what a paradigm shift. To say lightly, we have to completely rethink how we engage with our systems and the whole ecosystem in which we deploy them. It becomes a like a full system design change, uh, and just requires an enormous amount of patience and emotional intelligence. It's funny because McKinsey always said that that's what was coming. We were all going to have to be really good at being emotionally intelligent and socially aware and think about how things interact. And it turns out that that's because of the fact that our bots will have personalities and go do things, and we have to grow them in a way that they're productive and not destructive parts of our new society. So thank you, everybody. As Amy said, we'll follow up. And this is available immediately on YouTube. You can find the link if you haven't seen it already on the Luma event that you used to access it here. We look forward to continuing to have conversations like this. And as usual, Damien sets the bar at a whole new level. So thank you. Thank you very much. And we look forward to talking with you soon.